Policy Committee meeting. So we'll just do calls to order and then a roll call vote for attendance.
It's pretty hard.
Lori?
Present.
I'm here. Okay, we'll stand to pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and approve the agenda. Lori, do you have anything that you need changed or added?
I have something, but I think I can ask it in another part.
Okay.
So I think I added on there, but I think I can ask it in another part.
You want us to add it just so we don't
Sure,
forget it, or
it's kind of the committee purpose. So,
committee purpose?
yes. And really, it'll be just a question and then we define kind of that, but. Thank you.
Okay, so we will go ahead and approve the agenda with the addition of committee purpose. Lori?
Yes. It is.
Yes. Okay, so next is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
I read them in advance. I didn't notice anything. I make a motion to approve. I didn't see anything.
Yeah, no, I just noticed that, some of the discussion under number 8, members discussed the possibility of adding language related to the time frame for notifying parents and guardians. I think we can leave that there, but I think that's coming back around just because, so I just wanted to note that these meeting minutes will probably shift a little bit just because we're here to revisit some of those discussions, so, I don't have any additional comments. So, entertain a motion to approve the minutes of 8/12/19.
So moved?
All right, I'll second that myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Public comment. Do we have any public comment? Someone here to listen? Okay. All right.
This on it. This is more people.
Oh, sure. And if you would like to sign in and give us your contact information, then if we have anything that comes out of this meeting in terms of reporting back, then we'll know who to contact. So there is a sheet out there, and if you'd like to give us your name and contact information, that's great. Thanks. Okay, so we'll just dive right into the first policy that we have on our agenda, which is the credit for graduation policy. And Lindsay handed us a proposed revision that wasn't in the packet, so I think I'll just kick this off to whoever's gonna talk about it.
I think Mr. Leibarger is here, head of our Student Services Department, division head for that, and also Mr. Benedict, our high school principal. So this proposed policy came out of the discussion of policy 6310, that there were some revisions to that came through a press update, and then that led to discussion on, and then there were some of our own clarifications that we wanted to add to that policy. It was a bit outdated compared to what our actual practices were, and so they came up with just some additional language that is more reflective of what our practices are, and also just how we can update what we do, also looking into the future in terms of just making sure our policy is reflective of our students' needs. So let you guys explain it, and thanks for coming.
Yeah. So, felt like, given where we're at and where our current policy was, we took a look at like, okay, how do we make it more relevant? Probably technologies probably are, some of the language in our old policy was pretty dated. And so, and we've expanded just with all the opportunities that students have, particularly online and some of the different things. And so we broke our policy down into 3 areas. One, credit recovery, 2, courses exceeding our curriculum, and then 3, supplemental courses that are not offered at MSHS, and then trying to put some suggested guidelines in there that we felt like would kind of encompass what we see at the high school for students. Counseling staff and admin met about this and put this policy together.
Okay.
Or proposed policy, sorry.
Just for the benefit of everybody in the room, do you mind just reading through what you
Oh.
have and giving a little context? I just feel bad because it wasn't in the packet, and some
Yeah.
people who are here don't know what it says.
Sure, okay. So, Yeah, I can pull it up on my computer if we want to project it.
Whatever you feel
You
like.
guys tell me how you want to do it. You want me to do that? I don't know.
Looks like they might have enough copies.
Okay.
I think we're pretty good.
Okay. All right. The first one was credit recovery. Alternative programs. A student enrolled in online virtual learning, dual credit, or college university course may receive high school credit for work completed, provided the course is offered by an institution approved by the principal. Enrollment in these courses approved by the principal. The student assumes responsibility for all fees, including tuition and textbooks. Exceptions may be considered by the principal. Online courses will be determined by IHSA rules if they will count towards athletic eligibility. These courses may be counted towards semester eligibility with approval by the principal. Exceptions to any of these above criteria must be approved by the principal. And basically, our old policy had some language in there about the number of credits that you can transfer in, just in general, from another institution. Like this, an example of this would be with credit recovery. Let's say we have a student in the spring semester that fails a couple of classes for whatever reason. Well, we do offer some summer school, but we don't offer everything. And so whether they go to another institution to pick up those credits and then come back in order to get eligible for the fall semester or whatever activity they're in, then that would allow them to do this. Okay? Whereas our old policy, we were looking at this, there was still language in our old policy about, I believe there was administrative approval, but this would just kind of clarifies that we can take more than one credit. So, yeah. Any questions about that one?
I don't think so. The only thing that I noticed is that the other policy talked about accredited programs. Do you feel like that language is necessary here? Is that limiting? It didn't make it in. I'm just wondering if there's a thought process.
Good question. That's the course is offered by an institution approved by the principal, and so like generally our kids will use Centennial has a pretty extensive summer school offering, and then the Illinois Virtual High School is another avenue our students have used in the past. So, but I mean, certainly accredited could be added.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that it needs to be added because I wouldn't want to limit it if, I just wasn't sure if you removed that one for a purpose or.
No.
Okay.
No.
And then in terms of this policy, I'm a process person, so the thoughts that I have are, do you feel like there is anything that we need in addition to this in terms of when a student asks for permission, the process for them, engaging in this actual credit recovery, or their documents that we need to reference, the places that they can find those, or what's that process actually look like?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the process right now, and Tim can weigh in on this, normally the guidance counselor, if we see a student failing a class, then usually there's a conversation that takes place. There's not a formalized process as far as like this is step one, step two, but through different means, one being the teacher, two probably being our RTI committee, three probably a sponsor of some sort, or whatever extracurricular they're in, and we'll make them aware of options that they have if they're in need of a credit recovery. Some students fail a class and they're not necessarily in need of a credit recovery. It's just if they approach us and say, I want to recover this credit before I graduate, how can I do that?
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thanks.
Yeah. Go ahead and move on.
Please.
Okay.
I don't have anything else to.
Okay, so this next one is about courses exceeding our curriculum, and that's kind of in our mind, and Tim can weigh in on this, is if you've exceeded everything that we offer, so if you go through like our math sequence and you get all the way to the end, and you have no more math that you can take, science, whatever the subject area is, that's where this one falls into. Alternate programs, a student enrolled in an online virtual learning, dual credit, or college university course may receive high school credit for work completed, provided students have completed the top level offered at MSHS in one of the following areas: English, math, science, and world language, prior to consideration. The course is offered by an institution approved by the principal. I would say to that same kind of thought process with the accredited, okay? Enrollment in these courses is approved by the principal. The students assume responsibility for all fees, including tuition and textbooks. Exceptions may be considered by the principal. Online courses will be determined by HSA rules if they'll be counted towards athletic eligibility. These courses may be counted towards semester eligibility with approval by the principal. Exceptions to any of the above criteria must be approved by the principal.
Okay, I think one of the discussion points we had last time, and then I think it spilled into the board meeting as well. This really limits students to a course that exceeds what we offer. Have we done any thought about someone who just maybe needs to rearrange a schedule, either to make their workload a little bit more palatable, or, you know, I would hate to have language that restricts somebody saying, you know, I'd rather take this over the summer even though you offer it, just because of, you know, whatever, I have sports, my learning style just dictates that I need a little bit more time. Do you feel like I'm a little concerned that this feels restrictive.
Okay, I think I'll try to answer your questions, I'm not sure, try to understand it. I think our thought process, as we met with the guidance counselors and admin, was that if we feel like if we offer it in our building, that we want our students taking it in our building, if we have that capability. Are there exceptions to the rule? Yes, but it becomes very tricky to decide, you know, why a student should be allowed to do that and what that looks like.
I think we would want to, and this leaves it open to, there could be approval by the principal. So I think it would really need to be on a case-by-case basis. Because one thing we need to be cognizant of is that our numbers do drive our staffing and staffing levels. And we want to be as flexible and as accommodating to our students as we possibly can. Also balancing that with, you know, efficiently enrolling students. And if we were to start having more and more students taking courses off-site that we offer, it will impact staffing. And but I think that this does leave the opportunity for an individual to approach the principal and say, here's my situation. And so it doesn't completely shut the door, but I think there's got to be a little bit of some process to go through for approval.
And what we do in that situation is, if a student would want that, we're obviously going to meet with the guidance counselor and parents and sit down and go through that process and say, hey, walk us through how we're getting from point A to point B, and that's what's best for your child. Sometimes we'll get kids that'll come in, that'll go, you know, I want to take, there's sophomore summer, I want to jump ahead so I can take 4 AP classes or 5 AP classes their senior year. And we're kind of sitting here on the backside going, you know, for your own mental health, do you really, I don't know if that's the best choice for you, you know.
Okay. All right.
One other thing, if I could add that in, we find that the sequence of our classes, so if a student does what Chad just explained, where they take a class, maybe they take geometry at Centennial over the summer and we're with a head in our math track, typically they come back with a lot of holes. And that's nothing against Centennial's program, it's just a different curriculum. It's a faster curriculum, it's intended for credit recovery instead of acceleration. Mm-hmm. And so when they come back, they feel like they've got the base level in, but then they struggle the following year. We see that year in and year out for those students that it does that, which is another reason why we wanted to somewhat limit to the, as you're saying, the classes that are just above.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any more questions, or go ahead?
I don't have any more. Thank you.
Okay. And then supplemental courses not offered at MSHS. An example of this would be, you know, there's a lot of courses offered, say like at Parkland, that students can take that we don't offer, that would not be above and beyond, but maybe in a field that, you know, that we don't offer, a subject area that we don't want. So a lot of the language is the same. The course is offered by an institution approved by the principal. Enrollment in these courses approved by the principal. The students assumes responsibility for all fees, including tuition and textbooks. Exceptions may be considered by the principal. Online courses will be determined by HSA rules if they will be counted toward athletic eligibility. These courses may be counted towards semester eligibility with approval by the principal. Exceptions to any of the above criteria must be approved by the principal. So we have like, for example, right now we have a student who had an opportunity to join the aviation program at Parkland, and is a senior and currently has enough graduation credits that it's not going to impact whether he would graduate or not. And we were able to work that out. But, you know, in the future, it'd be nice to be able to say, okay, well, we could count that as a graduation credit, more than one. I guess he would get his one graduation credit for that it didn't impact it. So, you know, if the student has an opportunity in outside class or in a supplemental course, or if they want to take a course, they want to take a supplemental course over the summer, if they want to take a supplemental course at night, they can go do those things, and we're still, with approval, would be able to give them credit.
How often are we seeing that happen right now? Is it a handful of students, or? And the reason I ask the question is, if it starts to explode on us, I think that I would want the board to be aware at some level, just so that we can say, is there curriculum we need to be adding that's standard, and how do we stay on top of that, and how do we make sure that if there's interest in these other courses, if we can bring those in-house, how do we do that?
I think a good example of that, I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, but I think computer science is a good example of that, of a direction we're going, where we've seen some students maybe do that off campus as a supplemental thing, and like our student interest survey showed, there was a real need for that. So, you know, so we're looking at, obviously, we're going down that road.
Right.
So, yeah, good question.
Okay, so I guess as we move forward with this, just my thought is, if we have some mechanism for tracking this and really understanding those data points, that'll help us globally take a look at what we're offering, and if we need to shift, what direction we need to shift in.
Sure.
Okay.
Tim, can you maybe answer that, besides the computer science, like what other classes are them like?
As far as how often we're seeing that?
Yeah, or just like what are the common ones that kids go
Sure.
on?
Of these three different situations, the credit recovery and then exceeding and then just the supplemental courses, the supplemental is probably what we see the least. With credit, actually in this order, credit recovery being the most. And then the exceeding our curriculum, we're seeing that more and more. In fact, I think we have more this year than we've had in the past. But as far as other classes that students take, those are few and far between. I've seen them take psychology, sometimes at Parkland, photography for students interested in art, because we don't have any sort of a photography course. Really, there's not any other than those that stand out as far as the supplemental courses, but we wanted to leave that open to students who wanted that option.
And what are the areas where we're seeing that jump in exceeding the curriculum?
Math especially, absolutely math. And we have 2 students right now taking Calc 3 through a Google High program.
Good for them.
How many kiddos do we have in CNA?
The morning program?
Yeah.
With Parkland, maybe a dozen. Maybe a dozen. We have a program that meets, or actually we don't have a program, Parkland has a program called ECCA. It's Early College Computer Academy. And they offer basically an early attempt for our students to go over and get started on these programs. Automotive technology, CNA, computer networking. There's about 6 or 8 different, right? Criminal justice is another. And it gets them a jump start on a college program that they would be starting a few years later than anyone.
Excellent. All right, well, thanks for putting the work in on this.
If I could add one more thing on it, I think we should probably point out that one of the things that we changed on here compared to what's in the board policy right now is kind of an addition by subtraction, where we took out the words that limit the number of credits a student can transfer back. I'm not sure if we touched on that or not. But the reason there being, we talked earlier about limiting students to what they can take. And as it's worded right now, they can only transfer back 1 credit.
Right.
And as a result, we have students who, for credit recovery, for example, if they need to repeat a couple of classes throughout high school, technically, according to the policy, they're not able to transfer all of those back, even though over the years, we've kind of used that as a gray area and allowed those to be transferred back. But in order to, make the 2 things mesh a little bit better, we felt like we needed to just remove that altogether.
See, and I think that you are right in line with where our thought process was and the comments that were made by the board members. So good job. That was right where we were going to.
So, for the board meeting in October, then we'll do a first reading of this, and we'll incorporate the language that we've come up with into the policy that we have.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Just your question, like, about this, how much we're doing this.
Thank you.
And purpose. Okay. So the next, thing we have are the policies 2240 and 22220. Ken? That's you. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming. It's always cold in here, I usually wear a sweater.
It should just show up. That's okay.
Technology.
It's great.
It is. And not fun when it doesn't. Yes, the cameras, I don't know.
Can you have anything additional outside of what's in the packet?
No,
So you could
so,
just use my laptop, which
oh, yeah, we can do that.
You can work with it. You don't call it voting. It's just- Sorry, I should work with it. Okay, so-
That's okay. So,
Jared, just the, which system?
It's proximity. The white, blue one.
the only thing that's changed from the last time the policy came up, was that little line we added, if you are looking at the slide deck, it's the second to the last slide. And it mentions that, it adds the sentence from, IASB about, the role of the board policy committee. So, everything else is the same from our last policy committee meeting. When we presented at when I presented at the board meeting, I think we wanted to look into other avenues of change on this. And so, if there's any questions I can answer about the current version, or,
Give me just a second, because I
Okay.
had something else first, so,
okay.
thank you. Okay, I'm with you now. I
Okay.
had it, I printed it off the way, but that's not, I thought I had printed it off right. Okay, thank you. Can I ask you, well, but you're not there yet, I have a question about the indemnification part, which is later in there.
The indemnification.
Yeah, like if you go to the back of, isn't this the order of this, the current policy, and then you have the number, and then the part, keep going, and I'll keep going, and I'll show you.
It's
where.
oh, you're on, that's 2220.
Okay,
So
so
we're
now
on
we're on-
2240. So I think
Am I
that's the
ahead?
next policy you have the question on. Right.
Right.
So I am ahead. Okay, orange, blue, other than that. We're on 2/2/20, right?
We're on 2/2/40.
Okay. All right, I'm good. Thank you. I'm with you now.
So, I thought I would just open up to see what suggestions the policy committee has for this. What we'd like to see changed.
I actually like this policy for the reasons that I mentioned the first time we discussed it. Is I think the historical understanding of why policies change and what the thought process is behind changing policy is important and enhances the next board's ability to understand what our thought and rationale was for making policy changes. I don't know that policy change is something that you want to happen super frequently because it dictates, processes, procedures, and has this ripple effect. And so as a result of that, I think tracking the history of why the policy changes, when it changes, what specifically was changed is an important part of making good policy. And so I was a fan of this the first time for those reasons, and I think I still support this policy. And the theory of it, if people are, I think some of the things people mentioned were that it being overly cumbersome, forms. I don't think they're super cumbersome personally, but if the board wants to take a look at the forms, I don't have any problem with looking at the efficiency of that, but I do think the idea and the theory behind historically tracking the reason that we made policy changes and what drove those policy changes is important.
Yeah, so I went back and thought about the form and where we could trim things to make the process a little lighter. There's a final page of the form entitled Board Consideration, and it lists when the policy was first presented, when it was approved, and then how each member of the board voted. This is probably something we could pull out. You could dig through minutes to get this.
That's what I had it flagged for. I was just like, why are we creating one more thing? Just because we already have the historical data of it.
Right. So the reason I put this in here originally, and again, I'm okay with pulling this part of it. The reason I had this in here originally is when I was going and looking at current policy, one of the questions I always had was, how did this decision get made that we needed to have this policy? And one of the things that I would get value out of this page from is I would want to see who voted for it and who voted against it, because if I'm coming back 3 years later, let's say, I'd want to reach out to those folks and say, hey, what was your reasoning for why you were against this? Because maybe they can help me understand more about why that change happened or didn't, or why it was opposed at the time.
But it's in the minutes how they voted for it though, so.
Sure, and I'm saying that, but the thing is, what you have to do if you're working on policy is you'll have to look at the date that it was adopted, and then you'll have to go find those minutes. And we don't have our minutes up for, although maybe we are going to be in the future, we don't have our minutes up beyond past two years, I think. But again, I think it would be reasonable to take this page out. We could certainly do without the bottom part where the secretary is signing and stuff like that. That doesn't gain us anything. I just like the ability to see how the vote or the board members voted in order to have contact people.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with any of this, to be totally honest. I think it becomes a discussion of procedurally, how do we track this, and then where do these documents live so that people can access them. I think policies often have footnotes for reasons where you could simply track the historical, the reason the decision was made in a footnote. I think the more places you have to go to tie the whole picture together, it really prevents what I think this policy is designed to do, which is really improve efficiency and make sure that policy decisions have historical context and are being made with good reasoning. And so I hesitate to say you've gotta go to the minutes, and then you have to backtrack into voting records, and minutes and voting records are not traditionally super easy to go through if you've ever gone through that exercise. So having a procedure where solely for policies, everything that's happened with that policy is contained in one place, and the historical context of that exists as a collective, I think is good. We don't, we have the benefit of technology, and we have, data bytes. We don't have what we used to have, which is where do I keep the file folders and keep all of this paper. So in terms of storage capacity, and I don't think that's a problem. So the breadth of this to me doesn't seem overly cumbersome for the value of having the entire historical record of what's been done in the policy in a single place.
And I do want to point out that in the new policy for 240, there's a section called public access, and it talks about how the board secretary shall complete the form, and then the forms will be available in the district office. So that's where they're supposed to live. I mean, I'd like to see them up on, in some folders on the web.
And that seems most efficient. I mean, you can have it there, and we don't technically, if you go back, we have lots of things on the web.
Yeah, and it probably would necessitate an archive of policies in addition to current policies, so that people could switch back and forth and see what the history of it was, but,
If you've ever sat in that front conference room there, there's those red binders in there, those are like the historical minutes from the
right,
red bound handwritten ones.
right.
How long are those from? Do you have any idea?
Over 1900.
How about that?
Yeah. So my thought would be to send this back to the board, and my vote would be to support this change. Lori, I don't know where you sit on this.
My question was answered, so that was my question.
So do you think we should remove this entire page, or cut it down, or what do you think we should do? I just want to make sure.
This page here, the board consideration, I don't think you need all that stuff at the bottom. If your true intention is what you said, and when it was presented, why it was approved, how people voted, that's what you want to know. But then you added a whole bunch of detail on top of that. You said, I want to know why you did vote that way, and that kind of thing. So
Where do you see that?
he said that in his conversation. He said, I would like to go back and know why they voted that way, and then what their reasoning was for it. This doesn't have a place for reasoning. This just says why they would vote that way.
No, it's just, it would allow me to know who voted yes, who voted no,
Like, what do you mean?
so that I could reach out to them and talk with them. So you want
If
to,
they're currently a board member.
even if they're
Okay.
an ex-board member,
Alright.
it would be good to, anything to help understand the context of what the change was, is what I'm getting at. So would you like to just remove from the I, and then as the acting secretary down? Or do we want to remove this whole page?
I don't have a problem with the whole page. I think the I and the secretary is probably more than we need.
Okay.
It's gonna show the board members and how they voted, and I think that's probably sufficient.
So basically, are you saying keep the top half?
Yeah. I know that what he handed us is multiple pages, but I guess what I see is, my guess is that the rationale is not gonna be an entire page long. So I see when these are.
Sure, we know what we're bringing back on the 21st.
Right. No, so I see that, when you flip through this looks a little bit cumbersome, but I think in execution it probably
We'll use that.
Right.
And Lori, are you okay with leaving the top half?
I'm okay with that.
Okay. Any other changes we want to make?
None that I have.
Okay, and, so I would feel more comfortable if we make this, if we start it as a first reading at the next board meeting. Are you both okay with that? I feel like this is a significant change.
I don't
No? Okay, well, I mean, whatever you guys wanna do is fine with
I
me.
mean, I would be fine to, make a motion that we send this back to the board
To
with,
review and then vote on it the next.
with the approval of the policy committee. You know, indicating that we support this, back to the board with those changes and then move forward.
And
I
then
think it's, I would concur it's had a first reading.
Yeah.
I don't feel like they're significant enough changes, to be
Right.
totally honest.
Okay.
I mean, for me, if the policy content had changed, but if we're just removing a signature and a date line.
Okay.
No.
If you guys are comfortable, I'm comfortable. Okay, and so this has the support of the policy committee then?
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we send this policy back for a second reading in our next board meeting, with the approval of the policy committee.
So should it be an action item or you said second reading? I just wanna make sure that we're putting it on.
It's not to be voted on, but it's to be reviewed.
Well, a second reading is a voting one, so that's the question. I don't have any problem with voting, because I think we've had that discussion, but
Well, typically, so then here's where my question comes up. I thought it might come up here. So like when I added the agenda item, I said I add the purpose of the committee because historically, for the 2 years that I've been here, so anything that is presented on at the board meeting, I thought was ready to roll, recommended by the committee, and then it was either, voted in favor of or not in favor of, but it was already presented to forum and to the entire board. What I'm understanding, I've been wrong before, is that we're gonna fix it up and give it to them to vote on however they want to see it until the board packet.
well, they actually saw all of this the last time, because remember, they kicked this back to us.
Right, but it'll look different this time because we're taking that out, right?
Well, I think I would just point out that the only change we've made from what they saw is the removal of the secretary point. And if people feel like that's significant enough, then they could vote no and kick it
Okay.
back to us. I
All right.
personally, based on the comments that were made in the last board meeting, don't think they'll feel that way.
Okay,
I could be wrong too. But in order to be efficient, it would be my suggestion that we make the motion that we kick this back for the second reading, highlight that one change to the form that removes the signature and the date of the board secretary, and give committee approval for
Okay.
moving forward.
all right. Okay, I think I'm clear now, okay.
So I'll make that motion. Dawn, did you get that? Do you need me to repeat that?
Yeah, I'm not sure to read it.
Okay, so I make a motion that we take policy 2240 back to the next board meeting for a second reading and vote.
So I just have to offer a point of clarification. This is not on the agenda as a vote or an action item. It's just simply discussion in this context. So I don't believe we can vote on
You can, anything that's on an agenda, you can take action on. It doesn't matter what it's labeled.
it. Okay.
If we need to put it to the next meeting, that's fine too. I would just
No,
say at our next,
We've not, in the past policy meetings, we've not voted or made motions to send things to the board.
oh,
It's
I
just-
see what you're saying, in
Yeah,
this
so
meeting.
in this meeting.
So how does this committee traditionally make decisions then? Because I'm not
I think it's
sure.
just to review, and I'm not saying you're not making decisions, I'm saying that what we've done with the policy committee meetings thus far with both of you, we haven't voted on the policies that have come here, we've discussed them and sent them forth to the board.
I guess I'm not voting on this policy. What I was doing is making a motion that says we can tell them we approve, that we suggest we move forward with this policy, that's got the approval of the policy committee.
Okay,
Because otherwise, I'm not sure how we would do that if we don't take a vote.
we haven't the last couple times we've met, it's just been more of a consensus, yes, we're moving forward,
Okay.
and I'm not trying to get down in the weeds.
Yeah.
I didn't think that you could vote on something that is not listed as an action item on the agenda, but I could be mistaken about that.
And I'm misunderstanding, because I was thinking what you're saying is that you're just taking it to move forward.
There's no problem with
To move
moving
forward,
to the
yeah,
board.
that's what I'm saying. If we don't need a motion and a vote to move forward, then I'm fine with that.
That's
Just
what
trying
I'm
to-
saying, I'm not trying to prevent it from moving
Right.
forward.
No, I'm just trying to, for me, in all of the board work that I've done, if you don't make a vote, then the committee hasn't really spoken, because the only way that you can really speak as a committee is to take a vote So,
That goes with my question, is the purpose of the committee, the drafts, define the purpose, that's like all the things that I had, just, even with this, like we have something coming forward today that came from a board member to come forward today, but then like we didn't have the uniform policy change form, and so then I'm being made technical, so I'm like, okay, so do we need to be technical, do we need to have it on that form before we go to this? Do we need to have, whether we're gonna look at an extracurricular activity, be on a form before we go to this, because I'm just trying to gain the process myself, so that's why I'm asking those questions. Does that make sense? Okay.
well, how would you like to move?
No,
Just for clarification, though, the reason I didn't put it on the form is because we haven't voted on it yet. So we haven't voted, as soon as it's voted through,
gotcha.
then I for sure would use the form, but
So at the last meeting, I think there were a couple board members that wanted to know specifically if the policy committee recommends this. I just want to make sure before we leave today, if we make a decision on that.
Right.
Even if it doesn't have to be an official vote, it could just be a verbal, yes, we are recommending this. So with the change that we just talked about with the 240, does the policy committee recommend this?
I do.
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. The other piece of it was 2:20. And just a reminder, so this hasn't changed since the last policy committee meeting. This adds an additional power to the list of powers of the school board. Although the powers defined in the school board has a little clause that said the list is not complete. So technically, we're not adding power, we're just writing it out formally. And this was added because one of the changes we wanted to make to the 240 policy was that we wanted to remove the ability for the board to temporarily suspend a board policy. However, we were concerned that on a case-by-case basis, we would like to extend an exception for an individual student. And so this 20th power, I wrote this up and I hope it meets what the board is looking for. It basically authorizes the board to create an exception for an individual on any board policy, provided the exception is allowed by law. And it requires that an explanation of the exception, things like conditions and time frame, as well as the board's rationale for granting the exception shall be included in the meeting minutes. And it says that the identity of the individual can be kept private at the discretion of the board. I am more than willing to entertain any changes we want to make here or concerns.
This is the one where your final policy, you left out one of the legal references.
So, yeah.
You left out the compiled statute 10552-3.25D. So it was in the first one, but it's not in the second one.
Yeah.
You have it in the old policy, but you don't have it in the new one. And I'm not really comfortable with taking out legal references when it comes to policy.
Which one was it, 5/2?
So if you look at your original one, for the old policy text, it says legal reference 105 Illinois compiled statute 5/2-3.25D, but that's not in the.
Okay, the reason I took it out is that statute's been repealed. And the only way I knew that was I looked at the IASB version of this policy and I saw that it was missing there. So the press online service, it gives all the legal references. I mean, that's what I rely on. And they even, so I went and looked and see why it is they removed that, and it was because that law has been repealed. There was another slight change, I wanna make sure you see it. There's a reference in the old policy to 325 ILCS 5/4, and it changes very, very slightly, and it just takes that 4 off in the new policy. And this is from, again, the recommendation of IASB. In the legal references in IASB, that's a change.
So I have a question, Favor, for you or anybody who brings policy like before the board, just for helping me. So having sat on negotiations for a lot of different things I've done and boards I've been on, like the document today, like that we had, if it was color this morning, like from Mr. Benedict's and Mr. Lieberger's, there's like colors in red and slashes. That works so much better for me,
Yeah.
instead of having to look at the black and white side by side. I went and printed, like I made my own thing just so that I could see, does that make sense? And this is not a
Sure.
direct reading, but because I can't tell, and
Yeah, I have that in the slides, but I totally.
this isn't just for
actually,
you, it's happened in many things, but you know, like I highlighted it, I bold printed it. It just, it makes it really hard, because I want to be conscientious and make the right decision, and when they look the same, I have to go back.
And actually, to your point, I don't mention the legal reference changes in the slides, but typically, when I'm gonna do policy, I'm gonna do it like, I'm gonna use the form, but then I'm gonna build some slides that try and really visually explain the differences that are going on.
Okay.
But you're right, I didn't include that in the slides. And the thing I looked to just see why it is I changed those is the rationale page of that form.
So then to be clear, then the only change that you're proposing for 2:2:20 is just number 20.
It adds number 20, but it also reformats and changes the legal references in that. Yes, that's the only.
That really doesn't change it, it just updates it to be accurate and appropriate with IASB and the law.
Yep. Yeah, if there's another change, it's a typo, but I tried to look very carefully at it.
Okay, well, I don't have any problem sending this back we did review this one already at the board, correct?
Yeah, I think they both got sent back because they're related.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I would have no problem going back to the board and saying that this also has the policy committee approval. How do you feel about that?
As to the form that it's in now, as long as it's right, yeah. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, now we have proposed policy 740. Colleen?
There we go.
So our current policy, as you can see with the line that's crossed off, says that non-public students, regardless of whether they attend school part-time, will not be allowed to participate in extracurricular activities. This is a topic that is not addressed by law, but rather is left up to individual school boards to decide what they would like to do. So I am proposing that we adopt the paragraph that's there. I originally thought to propose something and I went to the IASB, and this is very, very similar to what the IASB in their press presents. And I wanted the language to be legal and approved as it has been. So this language appears in many policies of the schools in our county and in the surrounding counties and other places in the state. And so it just basically allows homeschool students or any other non-public school student to participate in our extracurricular activities.
Who in the area is allowed?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
So, I'll start by telling you who's not allowing it. There's 4 schools that don't allow it. It's Champaign, Monticello, Gibson City,
Us.
and us, yes. That would be it. So there are different rules in different schools around, but Urbana, Blue Ridge, Fisher, a lot of other schools around our area do allow this. And they have different setups, different ways that they decide to allow it. I actually know some people who participate at Unity, and this children are homeschooled. They wanted to play on the baseball team, and so they came and they brought their homeschool curriculum into the principal, who said, "Yeah, you're taking school," and they participated on the baseball team, and it's happening all around the area. So I'm suggesting it happen here.
I have some questions about it, just because
Sure.
Financial conscientiousness has been something that we've all talked about. I'll bullet them and then just so you can be thinking about them.
Sure, and I'll throw in a few that I've heard too,
Okay,
so we can have a full discussion.
Just because like some of those districts are pretty big and comparable, not Monticello and Champaign, because I called those myself. So I just kind of want to know about financial implications. How do we go about monitoring in-school eligibility? And I tell you this, you don't probably know this about me, but so I did have a job where I did social work and guidance, and I was the eligibility person. And it takes a lot of time to go make sure that Megan and Colleen have done their homework and that kind of thing, and that they're eligible to be in the activity. So that's, I mean, I have that perspective that I'm adding.
Sure.
And you can answer in whatever order you want, I just wanted, so I said financial, how do we monitor in school eligibility? Because if it's depending on how many people might be flowing into it, how much time will it take, and what is that taking away from? Would it make our class size, where we could add a teacher, we're adding someone to do this, so those are just my questions.
Okay, so there are two things that are required by the IHSA for students to participate in an interscholastic competition. Well, three. They have to live in the district, which we would assume these students are living in our district. And they need to have their curriculum approved. So that is a one-time deal, right? So you would have that approved. It's not that would not be being approved weekly.
Who does that?
And so that would be done by whoever we decide will do it. In Mahomet, not all, but a large number of homeschool students are using a particular program called Classical Conversations. And so when that would be approved, that would work for lots of homeschool. It wouldn't have to be every individual family has a different setup, and it's very academically rigorous. You might not know this, but in my current job, but whatever, I've spent over a decade doing articulations for the university and figuring out how to improve classes. And so that's sort of a one-shot deal. Then also there's weekly eligibility. And so for the schools around town, and it has been done before, the eligibility is determined by the teacher. In this case, the teacher is the parent. And so when our friends' children play baseball, before Thursday at noon, they have to turn in an eligibility report each week. Just like here, I actually had this great talk with Matt Hensley about this whole issue. That they look online and see what the teachers have turned in. So whatever the teacher turns in is what we use for eligibility. And so
like, do we mind, like, do we have forget it, because it's too technical and
so are we gonna monitor whether they did their homework or took a test?
No, just the grades.
Or their grades,
And
so.
and did you say a grade level? You haven't specified any grade level, like when you say extracurricular activities, like what year would that start? Like,
So this would be anyone in the district.
Gotcha.
Or anything. Yes. Financially, homeschool parents pay the same taxes as everyone else. And so they are contributing in the same way to everyone else for activities. And we're not asking that the school create activities just for homeschool kids, but just that they participate in the things that we already have.
Would the parents then also pay the activity fees associated?
And the parents will pay the activity fee and all the things that go along. One of the common things that I hear, which you guys didn't say, but I'm just gonna throw it out there, is that if parents don't think their kids, the school is good enough for their kids to go to school, then why are they involved in extracurricular activities? And for me, and from the homeschool parents that I've talked to, it seems to be more about a worldview, not a slam on public education. So they don't come and say, we think you're terrible. They say, we have a different view for how we want our kids to be educated. It might be religious, it might be philosophical, it has a lot of different, it might be just that the child has needs that can't be met to the parent's satisfaction in the public schools. And so, but as Mr. Hensley and I talked, there's lots of benefits to extracurricular activities, benefits children a lot. And I feel as though we should not allow children to participate and have those benefits just because their parents' worldview might not align with ours.
I've had a lot of parents also, reach out to me and ask that we address this issue. I think I've heard it, since I got here 7 years ago, so I think this is an ongoing request, from the community. If we're only one of 4 schools who aren't figuring out how to do this, I feel like it would be worth our time and effort to actually take this on and, figure out how to get these kids in. If we're talking about eligibility and forms like that, the nice thing is we have the benefit of technology. There's no reason we can't set up some sort of, web service form, some way, some mechanism. I mean, right now we have Skyward, and Skyward is what I'm assuming we use for eligibility. Not saying that we let parents into the back end of Skyward, but, I think figuring out how to track whether or not as students, teacher / parent says that they're eligible and that they're passing their grades each week or whatever interval we think is appropriate is not the hardest thing to do. Now, will we need some manpower to do that? Yes, I'd like to explore what that project looks like, but that does not seem like an ongoing project once you do the development piece of it. So in terms of what that's gonna cost, I don't know, but I think it would be worth exploring what the requirements would be, and then what a solution like that might look like. I suspect that maybe if we're only one of 4 schools who aren't doing this, there might be a solution out there that's already built, and we should do some investigating.
Can I just offer a tad bit of small clarification, maybe just more of a semantics thing? I think we're one of 4 in the area.
Sure.
I don't want to create the perception that we're one of 4 school districts in the entire state, because that's not true.
No,
In fact,
just
our
our area.
Our athletic conference, no one allows it. So, just to say we're one in 4 that don't do it, I just want to make sure.
Sure, okay, yeah, one in the area. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that,
Right, I just was comparing us to local districts. And the reality is that we have allowed homeschooling children to participate in activities in the past decade here. So, it's not always been the case that we don't allow this. We have had situations where homeschool kids have participated in athletics here at Mahomet Seymour in the past 10 years. So,
Mr. Hensley looks confused and
Someone on our soccer team was well, they couldn't have made it.
I understand lots of people have been turned down. I'm saying I know someone whose kid did participate. So it was not at the high school, so you don't have to.
So I believe.
He's like trying to figure out who could that be?
This is a ground level policy, like I would like to know, like, I mean, so we talk about your past and history, like what evidence-based practice, like what amount of students are we talking about that we're opening that to? Because we talk about, we had a hard enough time getting a budget for, like, if we're talking about, and especially it wasn't addressed in your grade level, but like how many potential kids could it be? What do we need to look at? Because we need to have the foresight to plan, to be thinking about that. So before we make a policy and present it for the whole board, I'd like to have all, the ducks in a row, like how many people could come in, we don't know how many it will be, what we think that might look like to overseeing it. And that's what I mean, those are some questions that I know that I have being a committee member.
When Mr. Hensley and I discussed it, he said, which I thought was very apropos, and since we were talking about sports at the time, that these things are a hurdle, not a barricade, right? Like, we have to figure out how to approve the classes and how to do the eligibility, but it's not such a significant thing to overcome that we wouldn't be able to figure out how to do that.
So those are questions that you can find answers to then?
So are you asking?
Well, I don't know, I mean, she said that you said it was a hurdle, not a barricade, so then those questions should be.
The eligibility piece, I think that Mrs. Hennessy is correct, that if this was a policy, then we're not even getting a legal here in terms of how we go about checking these students' eligibility. Okay, but there's more to that than just the eligibility piece.
I mean, what if 50 kids wanted to go out for football or basketball or the speech team, or, we have stipends that we pay for the speech team or the chess team or whatever. I mean, I'm just trying to, because it's
But we're not suggesting that there's any preferential treatment, right? Like, so if there's a football team and they have tryouts for the football team, if you don't make the football team, then you can't be on the football team.
My first question was how many people do we think this might be and what would the financial implications be? It has nothing to do with who would make the team or not be, I didn't say that. So
But I think the financial aspects of it obviously depend on, it's not as if we said we're gonna now expand our football team to include 30 more students than already play. So the mechanism for funneling people onto teams is not different, the funnel is just wider. You still have to try out, the teams will still have whatever they've determined is the appropriate number of students.
So we don't have a way of finding out how many people might be, that's kind of what
I think we could do a survey, I mean, I'm sure there are things we could do to
I'm
find
sure-
out who's interested in that, so if we
I'm
wanted
sure I
to.
could find out by
I'd
the
like to
October
know
meeting
that,
how
I mean,
many
just kind of like
kids are
background
homeschooled in our
information.
area.
You wanna know background information for a policy, I'm the same way.
I'm sure that I could provide an approximate number of homeschool kids in the area if I collected that data for you. Sure. I just don't understand the financial, like, how the financial aspect of the district changes for these
So,
kids.
you're adding another responsibility to someone's job. Why would that not change? Like, okay, so I'm responsible for making sure that the 75 students are eligible to participate in all their activities. That takes time away from something else, so that's my opinion. That's why I wanna kinda know how much it is and how much to prepare for it, you know? It's the plan and figuring out how to get there. It's a hurdle. Can we jump over that hurdle by getting some background information?
Sure.
It seems pretty, if you have access to it, I think it's easy to get, and I don't think I'm probably the only person that would be interested in knowing that. I would like to know that too.
I'll be happy to get that information. Are there any other concerns you have besides the number of students?
Do we have, someone said survey, like, what needs are we not meeting? You know, that, well, we don't meet them now, but like, what are kids interested in, you know? Just, I think if you were a coach and you took on a new job, you know, you'd wanna know, or if you're because you have a certain curriculum that our district teaches and they're aligned to that, you have kids that come in and maybe participate in a more academic extracurricular, we wanna have our informations merged so that we know how we're preparing kids for the speech team or the math team or that kind of thing. But if they don't have that to add, so just some information, like what are people interested in and about how many people we might be talking about. Those are like my 2 main questions.
So I'll be happy to gather that information for you. I just wanna say though, if we make a policy, we won't actually know, right, in the end. I mean, we can guess, is what I'm saying. I'll make a good estimate for you from the information that I have.
Well, I mean, we have sources that we talked about that you can utilize, and maybe they get that information out, and we can have a place where people submit that information, so we can say, you know, we're trying to get information and see where we're gonna go. You know?
Right, I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not up here because I know of a specific person that wants to do a specific thing. So I can't say, well, here, Betty wants to be on the speech team, and Jill wants to be on the basketball team, and Bobby wants to play football. Like, I will be so happy to gather for you my best approximation from all the people I talk to, how many homeschool students there are, and even get some ideas of what they might want to participate in. But because I'm doing this just as a general policy that's not driven by anything particular, there might be a homeschool person that I don't know,
I got
right?
that.
Or don't have
But I
any way to
mean,
contact.
usually you have a reason to create a policy, so there should, you know, other than people just want it, we should do it, you know, I feel like there should be some background that goes with that, other than we don't
Well,
have.
I think we've had, I've lived in this district for 7 years. I've heard this topic come up multiple times over the 7 years. And so I think it's a result of hearing from people in our community who are taxpayers, who are saying, we would really like you to look into making it possible for our kids who are homeschooled to participate in extracurricular activities. So I think what we're doing is listening to the public and saying we will explore that, and then in finding that, we know that there are other schools in the area who have had that same request and have found a way to meet that need.
I got
So I
that.
think the policy is a way to take what's being told to us by our community and find a way to make that happen for them. And so in terms of, you know, should we go through the steps of doing that, I do think that we need to have a little bit more data, but for me, is there a number of students where we get a survey and we say that's too many kids, or
No,
do we
I just would like more
philosophically
information,
say
then I have
that,
somebody that said, I'd like you to look into this, so
Well, and the other
that's it.
The other thing is that since the parents pay the taxes, I mean, we don't not offer extracurricular programs because we have to pay money for it for students who go to our schools, right? We don't say, well, we just don't feel like paying for the speech team, so we're not gonna have a speech team this year, even though all those kids wanna go to the speech team. I mean, we have extracurricular activities and
We
they
have
have
had
this money.
extracurricular activities though in the 22 years that I've been around here, so I do wanna look at what demand that might be coming in so that we don't have to do that, because it was pretty devastating to kids who lost their extracurricular activities, so I mean,
I guess
if
what
you
I'm
don't wanna
saying
do
is,
it, it's fine, I just would like to know that, I just wanted more information, I didn't realize it was not okay to ask that, I'm so sorry.
Right. I said several times, I'm super happy to get you that information. I'm just saying the point is that we should find that information, but if the parents are taxpayers, we shouldn't make those students second-class citizens to being in our district. But I'm happy, I've
We
said several
probably have
times.
it, actually, I'm thinking, you know, when we had our, gentleman come in and present all that data to us, he gave us a demographic of who we have. I mean, we can look at that and figure out, right? I'm talking to students, like, we can look at that and figure out what age our kids that have. We know how many kids are enrolled in school, so we kind of have that, right? We have that information.
We definitely, I mean,
I'm
we
sick and tired
definitely
of
need the
talking
information,
this,
for sure.
Right.
I mean, I'm just a person that likes to do things right when I do them, and so I just wanna be clear that I'm gonna get you the very best information I can possibly.
But we might have it, is what I'm saying.
But I might not know every single person or be able to know someone who knows every person, but.
Mr. Hensley, what, do you remember, and I don't know, I know you've been here for 14, 15 years, what did we cut? We cut something previously and there was,
Well, at this point in time, the only thing that is still out there, we have some specific coaching stipends that are remaining in the contract, but yet remain unfilled.
right? But we cut some extracurricular.
So, go ahead.
No, finish that. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, can I speak to the policy?
Absolutely.
Or is that?
Yeah, no, I think that's good.
So, to encapsulate the policy in a nutshell, okay? And I'm just, this is a fact, okay? One, not an opinion aside. If the board would choose to implement this policy, okay? And you look at the language that both the high school and elementary associations have in their constitution and bylaws, more specifically in this case, the high school association, okay? In order for us to approve homeschool participation, okay, then we are approving the curriculum, as Dr. Schultz said, that is being offered at that level, okay? In a nutshell, what we would be doing is we would be saying, you could never cross the threshold of our schools, and yet we will recognize your curriculum, and we will award you a diploma based upon that curriculum. Because essentially, if you're approving their curriculum, we're giving students credit for taking those classes. Then in a philosophical nutshell, because these are conversations that I have with other activities directors, okay? And although there are hurdles, no question about it, and some of those hurdles are logistical things which can be overcome. Typically, what most communities, the resident theme is that, look, we respect your decision to homeschool your students, that's entirely their parental choice, okay? But at the end of the day, the reason we're choosing not to approve your curriculum is because we have a curriculum that our students take within our building. And if you take our curriculum within our building, then we will grant you a high school diploma for whatever that's worth later, like a trade school or college or whatever that looks like, okay? So this would be approving a curriculum essentially, that's saying that student meets the weekly, semester, and yearly requirements, just like the kids who come to our building. So there really is no difference. There really is no difference.
Is somebody coming and asking for a diploma? I thought they were just asking for them to participate in sports.
Okay, but understand that if we approve a curriculum for a semester, a curriculum for a year, and a curriculum for 4 years, we're saying that student has done everything that our high school students, nobody's asked for a diploma, right? But in a philosophical world, we're saying to Jared Lynn, who homeschools his son, that what you're doing in your home is virtually it is the exact same that we're doing in our building. And so by approving that curriculum, just like we would approve a piece of curriculum for the Illinois virtual school, or just like we would approve someone to take credit recovery at Centennial High School, okay? We're recognizing those things. So we would be recognizing, and I'm saying right or wrong, we would be recognizing the curriculum that Jared and his family have chosen for their children. And at the end of that, if we recognize 20 credit hours of that curriculum, then that is absolutely no different than recognizing the 20 credit hours that we're giving to my daughter who goes to Mahomet Seymour High School.
Do we allow students to graduate with 20 credit hours?
Whatever the total, what's the take?
20.
It's 20.
Okay, so as a person who has articulated classes for many years, if this is a concern, one of the ways that could be not a concern anymore would be to articulate the classes not to specific requirements. So you could articulate it as an elective class. And if you articulate it as an elective class, it still counts for the IHSA requirements. It doesn't say it has to be 1 English, 1 science. It just says 5 classes, including PE, right? And so if you say, we are giving you 5, we would count this as a credit towards high school graduation, but it's not English 3, or it's not Math 2. It's a credit towards our graduation. At the university, we use dashes, right? So I approve classes all the time that are 1 dash dash, 2 dash dash, 3 dash dash. But we require specific things, and the reason is because we want them to take it at our school. So we want our kids to take our core classes at our school, so we know when we give them a diploma that we have they have met the requirements that we have. So you have to take 302 at our school, and if someone comes in with something that we don't think is, we don't want them to do it, we'll put 3 dash dash. So they'll get hours of credit for graduation, and it'll be a class, but it won't meet a specific requirement. And if you do that, then the students won't meet your specific graduation requirements, and you don't need to issue a diploma for a student, and yet they'll be able to participate in the extracurricular activities.
That's this body's decision, that's way above,
You mentioned that to me the other day, and so I've been thinking about it, how those things can be solved to not let the children not participate, right? I mean, that's a valid concern for a board and an administration, and here's how it can be, we can operate such that we won't have that concern anymore that we're doing that. And yes, Lindsay.
Oh, no, I'm finished, I just wanna.
No, I'm finished.
Okay.
So the title of this policy is non-public school students, so I just want to offer that this does extend beyond just homeschool students, and that's your intent as well for.
I don't care, I left the title because that's the way the press had it. I'm happy to make that.
Well, I
Homeschool
think
students,
it warrants
if you-
conversation on then what's
To be-
the intent here to include,
Okay.
because non-public school students way more than homeschool.
Right, I'm really sorry.
No,
Let me explain it again, or not again, I've never explained it, so it's not again. First time. It is, let me say these things that I did not say. Because I didn't want to overwhelm people with a bunch of words on paper, Policy 740 is a long policy that has a part before and a part after it. This, I think, is the second, so this extracurricular activities is the second little blurb in there. It turns out, after my discussion with Mr. Hensley, I know that parochial students from a school that is an IHSA school are not allowed by IHSA rules, which would be covered in, it has to be within the rules, right? It says adheres to the regulations established. So those students are already excluded by virtue of the rule being if your school has an IHSA sponsored program, you must participate there. And we could not think of any school around that's not that way, but I mean, I guess if one pops up and it's a parochial school, then the kids, I guess, could participate if they happen to go to a school that doesn't exist yet, but
Thank you.
if that happens, we will do that. So this is just a little blurb in there. And back to one of Lori's questions from earlier, like a lot of people have brought this to us, and the only answer that anyone ever gives is like, that's how we've always done it. And so, Mr. Hensley and I also talked about, he said that in the whole time he's been here, it's never been discussed at the administrative level. So this isn't something that we've discussed and thought about and then made a decision to say no. It's sort of like, it's how we've always done it. And it seems like it's a good time to revisit. So.
Do you mean at the board level?
Yeah, clear.
He said when they've met with administrators, it's never been a topic.
I should clarify, I've never been part of a conversation at the board level. I should apologize, I missed that.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, I
don't know.
So-
I mean, it's okay. So I just.
And I'm just asking questions, you know,
And I appreciate it so
and
much
when I-
because I love information, and so
I just,
I'm just,
but I bet we have some that data.
what I want to, I mean, I just feel as though if I give you information, I want to clarify or put the asterisks that I would do the best I can for you. And so I can have that before the October meeting, so.
Okay, questions?
So do we want to move forward by, sending this to the full board for first review? And Colleen will come with data, requested?
What do you want, policy, proposed policy? Yes.
For first review for 7:40?
Is it right?
Not a vote, just a.
Yeah, but
conversation.
first, you ready for a first review though?
He'll be ready for a
Okay,
first review
all right.
on October.
Okay, so we feel like we can move forward with the policy recommendation for first reading?
Yes. I'm gonna step out for
Just
just
step
like,
out for a
for
second.
30 seconds. 40, you're right back.
Thank you.
So the next one, is instructional materials policy 6.2.10. And we started talking about this. This has also had a first, reading with the entire board and was another policy that was kicked back. There was discussion regarding some of the language, and they asked us to come back and clarify it. And that language really, surrounded knowing whether or not parents would be notified and what the time frame would be in order for parents to opt their children out of movies. And so I think the on the table is what is the appropriate mechanism for notifying and allowing parents to opt out. And I think we talked about at the large board, the big board, having Merle specifically, and I think Jeremy also wanted the parents to be notification versus permission. So they both wanted permission, and so we came back to discuss whether or not, you know, what the mechanism was gonna be for informing parents at what time frame, and then the notification versus permission. And so I know originally we talked about 48 hours as a time frame that would probably allow for parents to not miss an email and, so I think adding that parent notification 48 hours in advance of any movie being shown. And, then do we assume tacit permission if we don't hear from them? That's where we kind of landed.
Just a couple questions, that I would just want to throw out there. I'm not sure the answer, but is it the thought to provide notification and permit, so are we talking permission for all levels of movies? So I think we're saying, for PG 13, and in like extremely rare, I can't even think of what it is, R-rated movies for high school kids, which probably likely is more likely clips from those movies. So are we getting permission for G-rated? Or is that just notification, or?
I think that's what we're grappling with. I mean,
I would suggest just permission for junior high and above for PG-13.
that seems to make sense,
Um,
because I think that's with the movie guidelines, it's
Yeah.
kind of parental, PG-13 is that threshold for.
I would also just go with tacit permission from the standpoint of gathering up. I mean, if you're a teacher and you've got, 6 sections of something where you're showing them, I mean, that's a lot of paper to, I'm sure it could be accomplished through Google form, but either way, you're gathering hundreds of things
Right.
together, so.
No, I think, where I was thinking is 48-hour email notification from the teacher to the parent, that a movie is being shown, and if you don't want your child to participate in that movie, you need to let me know by whatever,
So the parent must opt out.
yeah. I mean, I think, so we don't overwhelm our teachers,
That'd be super
it's
helpful.
probably a little bit.
But then you can take out the elementary part, because you know that it'll only be G. Or no?
Quite honestly, I feel like, old G-rated movies, like if you think about Snow White, like those are really old school movies, but in rewatching those with my kids, there's death, there's shooting. So I really feel like if we are going to cover all of our bases, we just say there's 48-hour notification of a movie being shown, and parents have the ability to opt out.
I think, if it would be okay, I'm gonna suggest, minimum of 48 hours notification. Because I think what we'll see happen, and I believe what might already be happening, is kind of at the beginning of the semester saying, here are some movies that are gonna be shown. Or it could be a week in advance, or that type of thing. So just say 48 hours minimum, and here are the movies that might be shown this semester. And then I think sending out another hey,
It's movie day coming up.
Right, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think if the teacher wants to send a global, this is what we're looking at this month, and then just a reminder, this is, because I would imagine that we have to figure out what to do with that child if they're not gonna sit there, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So,
I envision, this is, so being a visual person, how would you feel if this were made into like a table? And it was like, G movies, here's what happened. G movies, here's what happened.
it's probably a good idea.
I
I think it's easier
Table by
for
rating.
other people to see too.
I got recommended for like my kids watching Nemo for that exact thing.
Well, I mean,
She's like, they ate Nemo, I'm like,
Right.
you took me to Lady in the Tramp,
so yeah, I think a table format sounds great.
Minimum 48 hours notification.
A minimum of 48 hours notification, and if you are a teacher who's gonna do a global, this is what we're doing this month, I think they should also take that step of saying, don't forget, movie day is 2 days from now, or,
Reminder.
right, and we will be showing this movie, because my thing is that if you say, these are 6 movies and I only object to one and I don't know which one's gonna be shown, I would, not wanna send one to the teacher and so they have to keep track of all of that, but if I know that that's the movie being shown and that's the one I object to, then it's an easy, yes, please don't include my child. So is that clear as mud in order to
I
take?
No, I can table. Sounds good.
So we did discuss this earlier, sent it back here, so on October 21st, discussion or vote?
I'd like to make a motion that we take this to the board to vote on the policy with the revisions. I have 3 of them. The table by rating, the minimum of 48 hours notification, and a reminder of the movie day.
And the specific movie being shown, yeah.
Reminder of
And the parents
Opt
have
out.
to be the ones to opt out.
Correct. Yeah, and I think because we had discussion, I would feel comfortable with taking it back for a vote as well. Okay, so then we're on to the parental involvement policy. I think Colleen, brought this to our attention in the board meeting. No, I remember what it was. I was just saying why this one got kicked back. That we changed some language from the IASB that says the superintendent, the IASB reads, the superintendent will do the following 5 things. So the shall monitor and review building procedures, that was added by our district. And so I think we were looking for some indication as to why that, do we know why that language is different?
No, and if you go look, it was adopted in 2008. So
Right.
I can't speak to it. You guys are the policy committee, I don't have any problem with what it says, but if there's desired changes or
I think if
just wanna go with the press policy, then.
Either is fine with me. I would just say the superintendent and the building principals if we were, just because,
Oh, yeah.
communication is,
Sure.
you know, kind of the crux of what we do. So I think if we wanna leave that procedure part in,
And say the superintendent and building principals.
yeah.
Yes.
And of course, the thing that it says to me by adding that language is, what's the process for monitoring and reporting back? Because it does say, the superintendent shall report back periodically to the school board. So we probably need to say the superintendent and building principals will report back. And then what's the mechanism? And are we gonna have specific expectations about, is it number of contacts, topics of contact? You know, that puts a whole, you know, when you're talking about then reviewing procedures and policies, there's the assumption of data and data points.
Something that she would need to go talk to the administrative team out to figure out how they wanted to take track of the information they're getting.
And that's fine, but I just recall that that's why we kicked it back, so. I just think what we need to have on our to-do list is what's the mechanism for coming back to talk about the implementation of the policy.
And I think they would be good people to ask. since
Oh,
they're
sure.
the ones that
Yep.
have done that.
Yep.
And administrative meetings.
Okay, so do we wanna just leave it in as is and add building principals after superintendent in both of those areas? Or do we wanna go back to the IASB?
I like the superintendent and the building principals.
Okay. All right, so we'll send this back to the board with those changes and suggestion that we agree and support that. Okay, so now we're talking about the technology agreement, or technology acceptable use agreement. And
I can also do some gap for some.
yes. Didn't, thank you for giving me a little bit more time.
I think it's pretty yellow on it.
Because some personal stuff that kind of got in the way of me getting this all together, so I appreciate the extra time. Anybody wanna, I got a couple extra copies, anybody wanna? And I'll send it via email too after the fact, so. So this is the policy that was, I'm actually the one who brought this up. And I had some concerns with respect to some of the privacy issues and the things that we were asking for our students to give up. So what I did is I just added and changed some language, and the yellow is what I've changed. So I'll just start at the top. And I just put in a little bit of context about why we, that the technology is a tool, and as such, responsibilities fall upon both the student and the parent and the district in order to ensure that the tools are effective and safe and appropriate. and wanted to put a little bit more context. The main thing the reason I brought this back is I didn't feel like there was enough information about what the district was responsible for, and it felt very one-sided to me. And so this is my attempt to balance that out a little bit. So that top paragraph is self-explanatory. This second area, I understand that anything I do online may be interpreted as dangerous to myself or others or inappropriate for learning, or the intended curriculum may not be considered private and may be monitored. I wanted to add that context as to the types of things that we would monitor kids for. Felt like it was a little bit loose in the language to just say we're gonna monitor everything at all times. I wanted to put some clarification as to why we would deem them inappropriate. And then I added in the second paragraph, I added the district will provide a mechanism for reporting any bullying behavior that a student may perceive as harmful to themselves or others. Bullying that is reported to any staff member will immediately be documented in writing centrally within the district. I wanted to put that in there because I think it's important that students understand what we're going to do with their reports of bullying, and that we have some mechanism for tracking that and monitoring that moving forward. Then the third one is the district and its staff will provide as part of its curriculum instruction and examples on how to appropriately evaluate online resources and information and integrate that into student learning. I just wanted to put that in there because I think sometimes we forget that students, although they have access to all sorts of content online, they can go down wormholes where you start on something pretty innocent and you're getting to something that's no longer appropriate pretty quickly, and that hopefully our instruction is going to also include discussions about that and when you're clicking through what can happen, and so that the district would provide that as well. So
Mine's yellow.
Mine's yellow. Everything's the same except if you have it in yellow.
When I've been there, like, I help with those interviews, like her talking to even like in the library at the high school, you know, about the students, about being cautious and careful.
Right.
I know this.
Right.
Some of it we're doing.
Yeah. And so, responsibilities, I changed number 2, it just said that they will take it home and charge it. I just said that the responsibility is to ensure that the device is charged and ready for use, however they need to do that, and that we will provide opportunities during the school day, because as batteries get old and things like that, there are sometimes times where students aren't going to be able to do much about a battery going quickly, and that they won't be held responsible for that. Number 5, I added teachers and staff have the right to confiscate a device that is not being used appropriately in a class. Students will be held responsible for any missed work while the device is confiscated. I actually added this because I've been driving to 0 hour and I have kids in my car, and I've been overhearing discussion about kids who are playing games or somehow have figured out how to be where they're not. So I wanted to give the staff and the teachers some ability to say, I'm taking this from you. If you can't use this tool appropriately, you're gone, and you're gonna have to figure out how to get your work done. So if you don't wanna participate and be responsible in class, there's, what part of what you signed on to is if I catch you and say, stop doing that, and you don't wanna stop doing that, I'm gonna take that device and you're responsible for getting your work made up.
You paid for it as an instructional tool.
Right. This is a tool, it's not a gaming device. 7 is where I did a lot of changing, because this was the one that gave me the most concern. I felt like we were really asking students to give up their privacy in its entirety. So I just wanted to provide some context and some more specific language about when we might, what we might do. I'll just read it. So the district uses software designed to restrict access to unacceptable content in order to protect students from harm or danger. If the district has credible reason to believe a student may be accessing dangerous or unacceptable content, the district will take steps to intervene. The steps will include parent-guardian notification, which includes the suspected danger or violation, and a procedural plan to remedy the activity. This plan may include monitoring of district technology, student files, and student activity for the sole purposes of the protection of the students and others. where the information is gathered is specifically used as examples as part of a plan or corrective measure. I wanted to put this down because I felt like this provides some context as to why we would be monitoring what kids are doing. And I think it also takes into the fact that these are still minors, and I wanted parents to be notified and informed as to if we are taking steps to really monitor what's going on. One, I think parents need to be informed as to this was a danger situation or a bullying situation so that they're informed fully, and that the district is very clear as to what we are doing with that information. So that's where I added, in cases where data needs to be archived, the district will receive parental permission to do so. Prior to archiving that, which includes a detailed process of what will be done with the data and when the data collection will cease and subsequently be destroyed. I thought it was important that if we are going to collect data, we also have a specific language around when we get rid of that data. I don't think we have the ability and the rights to hold data on a person, infinitely. And then I think that you must make your one-to-one devices actually still part of the existing policy. So again, I just put that in place. I'm more comfortable with this language because it includes process and procedure, parental notification. It tells the student what to expect, and that there is some reason we start monitoring them. And so I felt like that was a little less invasive on their privacy. On page 3, I added this yellow section that common sense maintenance when it's in the possession and under their control. And then I added the district will ensure that these guidelines are followed when students and technology are within the district's environment or students are participating in district sanctioned events such as sports or extracurricular activities which include district oversight. So again, I don't think it's fair to hold a student responsible for having a Chromebook on a hot bus if they have no choice in that matter. So it's just putting a little bit more context around what the district responsibility is with the tool when the students are participating in district sanctioned events and under district staff supervision. And then I just put this language, which is pretty typical in contracts, about if it's determined that a good faith effort or willful failure to protect district property has occurred, that a student and their family may be responsible for repair or replacement of the Chromebook. I just felt like it seems a little bit more give and take than what was there before, which was really just if it's lost or stolen, you're responsible, without any language that suggested that we will take a look at the circumstances and make decisions appropriately. The next one is I added, if we were talking about loss or the district's network, I just added if the district network is unavailable and restricts a student's ability to complete schoolwork, the district and staff will make accommodations for the completion of the work. I think that's probably assumed, but I think it's, when you're talking about an agreement that seems to have this much technical and legal detail in, I think it's important that we put that in. So that we have our part of the bargain is upheld. And then I was having trouble getting on Skyward, and then I couldn't find the Chromebook damage and replacement plan. But I suggested, Jared, are we still using that?
The damage replacement plan?
Yeah, okay. So what I also suggested is that we just then make that plan a part of this document too, because that we reference it, but you don't really know where to go and find that to understand.
And so is this going to go into the student handbook proposal for the 2020 school year, and you put in the online registration begin, or?
I mean, I'd like to see it rolled out before that, but if that's what the board thinks is appropriate, that it can wait till 2020, we have the ability to send this via Skyward and just say this policy has been updated and here it is for your review. I'm more comfortable with this language, so I'd like to see it happen before that, but we can, if that's not something that's feasible.
Jared, can you speak a little bit to just some of the language in item 7? I mean, it's just technically not something that
So,
I'm not gonna get around, so.
realistically, we have no way to determine whether or not it's, a problem, be a harm or danger versus regular student conversation or student browsing history, for example, right? So no matter what we do, we have no way to not filter, not archive, not do whatever because of the way that the software is designed and utilized. So for example, GoGuardian, right? So everything that the student does in GoGuardian is monitored and archived and tracked. That is by design.
Okay.
There's not a way for us to turn it off and until they do something wrong, then turn it back on. That eliminates the classroom management piece of this, right? So our teachers use this every day in classroom management to make sure that the students are on task or on time. And then additionally, whenever you add in filtering to it, so to say whether or not the kid is browsing educational content versus non-educational content, there's no way for us to say, well, we're gonna filter it, but we're not gonna also keep track of what you did. Does that make sense?
Great.
So whenever you do filtering, it has to be able to know what was accessed in order to determine whether or not that site is legitimate or not. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you're going about this, it's no matter what we do, that filter is going to keep track of what you did. And so the option really is it's black and white. You either turn it off and there's no filtering, which we can't do because of CEQA requirements, Children Internet Protection Act, because we have to have some form of filter in order to receive federal funding. Or we filter, and that also includes monitoring. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It really then also becomes sticky. Let's say it didn't affect self-harm or it didn't affect bullying, but it didn't affect like two students, and Mr. Benedict can attest to this as well, that were maybe conducting conversations that were inappropriate. There's no way for us to determine what the context of that was without having some sort of archive of that.
Okay. So how does it get flagged, I guess? I mean.
So that's all what's called machine learning. So it's all automated, based off of keywords, based off of browsing history, based off of, so for example, by doing some research that says, hey, we're looking for drug addiction, right? That's gonna get flagged the first couple times because the system thinks, oh, they're looking for ways to become addicted to drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then what'll happen is after a period of time, the system goes, oh, wait a second, they're actually doing research. And that should no longer be noted as actually like they're attempting to do drug addictions.
So how do we, what is our flag for knowing the difference?
So it's all automated, right? So what'll happen is whenever we have an event that's been triggered, Mr. Benedict or Mr. Bailey or at the junior high, Mr. Fisher or Mr. Mills, we get a notification that says, hey, this particular student has been doing something inappropriate. Take a look at it. It sends a screenshot of what they did. It also gives some prior context about what they were looking at in their browser history before and after the alert, essentially. And then you can determine whether or not that was actually something actually educational versus is this something that we actually need to have a sit-down conversation with.
Okay.
Ultimately, and I asked a lot of other districts, not just in this area, but throughout the state of Illinois, what they did, and their response to me was, this is a student or a school-owned device, a school-owned account. There is no student privacy.
So what do we do with the archived information? How long is it archived for, and when do we?
So student accounts are, as they leave the district, they're disabled, but we don't delete their data. We just hang on to it, we just sit on it. But those accounts are indefinitely suspended. Unless, let's say, for example, a student comes back to us, they've graduated and say, uh-oh, I didn't grab X file and I need it for some project that I'm doing. We can then reactivate their account and they have access to that set of data files again.
So that's their data files, but does that include all of their search history as well?
Censorship, yes. But again, while they're a student here, it's our account. It's not theirs.
So they just take in privacy.
If
So like, me and where I work, it says, right when you turn on the computer, acceptable use policy. By logging into this computer, you agree to follow the district's acceptable use policy and web publishing guidelines. This policy is linked on the district homepage and in the student code of conduct. I mean, it's very generic, but they get that before they go on each time. So, and then the U of I one says, I thought I had a picture of it and I didn't. It's more descriptive than that. It says, basically, we own it,
Yeah.
It's our,
Everything
if you're using our tool, it's our information.
right, and it would go the same way with pretty much any employer that you can work with. If you're utilizing their device and their accounts, you have essentially no privacy while you're employed there.
I'm gonna have to think a little bit more. I think we need some sort of, I don't feel good about keeping somebody's history ad nauseum. I think that's inappropriate to keep. I mean, we've said we will use this tool and we have no actual, we just said we're gonna monitor everything you do. They're minors. It's very loosey-goosey about how we keep their data and track their data. Apparently, we then own their data.
Yes, we do.
So what do we owe these students back is what I'm trying to get at. If we are going to say to them, you must use this device, and these are the rules, the district owes them some sort of process that ensures that they're flagged appropriately, that the data that we collect is protected. I mean, these are minors, so I'm pretty sensitive to this, All of my kids' stuff is done on Google, not because they want to, but because that's what the district has decided. And Google makes me crazy. Google knows when I go into Target. Google knows everything that I do, which is a problem that we can't solve here. But this is such a slippery slope here, and I guess I'll go back and think about this, but and maybe you can think a little bit about this for me too, and principles.
It's just the 7 one, really, right?
Do you understand what I'm trying, I'm trying to do?
I completely understand, but my only concern is that what happens whenever we have no mechanism in place for whenever that student does do something inappropriate.
No, I understand, I think it's completely appropriate to monitor. I just feel like we hold all the cards and we're not telling our, I've asked my boys, what are people talking to you about? When you go on and when you do research and when you use Google and when you do this, what are your teachers saying to you about privacy and being tracked and all of that? And they don't have much to say. So I'm trying to figure out how we as a district help these kids navigate this technology that's beyond what they can understand right now, and that we're asking them to utilize.
So one thing
I feel like I feel like the partnership here, and especially in this agreement, which is what spurred this, is very one-sided, and we dictate everything that needs to be done, but I don't see that hand coming out to the students to say, and as a result of this, we need to either educate you this way, or we're gonna protect your data and only use it in cases where we determine that it's self-harm, but you need to know that every single keystroke is tracked. We intend to keep it forever. I mean, these are things that aren't discussed with the students, aren't really discussed with the parents either. And so I'm just looking for an agreement that isn't, it seems so legalese that we're forgetting that these are minors and that these are kids that need help. And so that's why I keep circling back around to this one. And I feel like there's a piece missing on our part as the district with that student side of it. And that's what I'm trying to solve.
Well, and I think it's evolving too. I think it's not perfect yet because it's still so new to people, you know, they don't have it all figured out yet.
No, but at the same time, we better get
You know, Blue
somehow.
Ridge just went to Chromebooks, you know, they're doing other stuff. And so like you know, people look to us as we look to them. And so maybe, you know, it's just an evolving process as we're learning as we go too. I think it's good to learn. I see the whole point of learning for it.
So one thing to keep in mind too is that this account is only intended to be used while there are students here, and the only information that we provide Google is the first and last name. So there's nothing else there that ties any other information to it. So once they leave the district, we shut it down. There's that disconnect occurs between their personal, once they graduate school or whatever they leave the district, and whatever they do with their own, whether that be a Google account or any other type of online service. Those are completely disconnected. Because we don't share that data, right? So along those same lines is it goes back to that student record, right? So keep in mind too, we're required by law to keep data for student records, right? What they've completed via Google Docs or Google Drive, we have to keep that because it's part of their record. And we have to be able to provide it whenever it's been requested. We can't really necessarily delete it.
Yeah, I just think a student record used to be the work you turned in and submitted and it was paper. And a digital thumbprint is totally different.
But they are turning stuff in electronically.
I know, but that's not the only thing that we're keeping.
But we also keep all of their records, whatever that be, whether that be,
Grades, IEPs.
grades, IEPs.
Yeah, I know, but all of that, if you think about that, that is not my search history, that is not what, you know, there's a different level of information being tracked and kept by us than when it was paper and pencil. And so, the magnitude of what that means, I think we don't even know yet. And in this agreement in particular, I didn't feel like the district is doing enough that it wasn't kind of didn't feel like a partnership to me with parents and kids. It felt like we own it all and you just do what we say. And I'm just looking for a way to have this be more of a partnership.
Is there any research that we can do to have moving ahead to help or
Probably, I'll have to think about it, but
happy to help?
yeah, and maybe we need to, you know, maybe it's curriculum wise, it's what teachers say to students and it's a little bit more of the education piece that goes on in the classroom instead of just handing. I mean, right now we're handing first and second graders devices and they don't have any concept. And I know that we're monitoring what they're doing, but there's a whole world that comes along with handing them this device and we aren't caught up to the point where I feel like we're preparing them. And then especially when we get into 6th through high school, this is what we're asking them to do all of their work on. And I just feel like there's a piece missing, I guess. And I don't know how to articulate it any other way.
No, I think you're doing a great job of explaining the concern and appreciate all your work on this. I think from my standpoint, the other changes make sense and they just more clearly spell out the different parts of the policy.
So, I mean, I guess what I'd like to do is have an ongoing conversation
Not said.
about the data collection and monitoring, and I don't know how we solve that, and I don't know how we solve it in this document in particular, but the idea of connecting more with kids about what that actually means and informing them, and then also informing parents. And my kids come home and do all their work, and I'm just such that I don't have to be involved. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't know what's going on. And right now I don't even know the questions to ask. And so I just feel like there's a puzzle piece missing in terms of education and information, both to the students and to the parents. And so I'd like to figure out how to solve that.
I'm sorry, I think part of that goes with the continuing community engagement. I know that a couple of us were in that room when we had the lady come and talk before school that one year in August. It was before the last school year, and there were like 25 people there. You were there, I know Colleen was there, I remember some of us were there. And I think those are discussions that are important to have. That she's from Chicago, and I've sent them out to people, you know, about different ways to monitor your device. And you know, I think the one really great thing is that it's a whole new component, not just for educators, but for parents, what you give your kids and what you don't give your kids, and, you know, I can't tell you how many times I got, so-and-so has a phone, well, I'm sorry, our little is 15, you know, and that was, we stopped that, so.
So, if you're okay with the rest of the changes, we can go back and look at 7, Jared, maybe I can meet with you and
Absolutely.
we can come up with some language. I mean, I understand, I also don't wanna strip the protection and the monitoring, because for safety, it's a really fine little line that we're walking here, and
I understand. I mean, do you, I could look them up, but, you know, you get the reminder as a parent, Google alert, your kid was searching this or whatever, you know. So I get them, but that might be because my kids are in high school. And I'll have to look at the one I just got, like, my kids both got one yesterday, and it must come out after the weekend and what it said.
So maybe we just need a piece, cause I didn't know that I could sign up for that, so maybe it's a whole.
That's through securely, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, securely, that's what it's called, I was trying to think of.
We'll send out another survey about that.
Okay, I'm gonna show you, so,
That's only for what they do after school, right?
Correct.
so.
But keep in mind too, the browsing history is not able to be deleted by the student.
I got to know that.
So you can see what they've done throughout school as well.
Okay.
So you have access, you just say, hey, I need to log into your Chromebook, and you have access to their history. We intentionally do not allow students to delete their history, because then it becomes he said, she said, whenever we call them to the office or whatever.
Try to do a photo. That's very, so, I mean, they come out, usually it seems like they come out on Sundays.
Yeah, they do something.
Okay, well, I don't wanna, I
However,
don't think we
no,
can solve this
So
here, but I'd
that's-
like to keep it on our,
that's a good component to add, though.
On
You
our
realize as a
plate.
parent that you have this securely, you sign up for it, I didn't even know I signed up for it. So,
We signed you up for you, and you can accept it.
so I must have accepted it, and I'm good with getting that.
so, but if you're okay, I do like the rest of the language, I just feel like it's a little bit more
Yeah.
there, and then we can keep working on 7, is that?
So I'd like to make a motion that we take this, I'll make it easy.
Okay.
Make a motion that we take this document to the board for presentation, but omitting number 7 on it at the October board meeting. But I'd like the board to know, can you say that? Huh? That we take it, so because
I
they,
can say that, I just have a comment on it.
okay, all right, because we want to have that 7 not be in there, okay. So they need to have a first reading of it.
Well, this isn't policy, actually. This is not board policy. This is in our district student parent handbook. And the process for approving that goes through our parent teacher advisory committee. And so I'm hesitant just to, this hasn't gone through the process that the rest of the handbook went through.
That's fine.
And actually, we did vote on that handbook at the May 20th meeting, and it passed, and.
Right, so I'm good with the change, and at the end of the day, the board votes on the changes, but what I'm just saying is that this would be circumventing the parent teacher advisory committee to just take these changes to the board.
Well, like I said earlier, if it's more appropriate to do it next year, whatever the timing is, if there's a process that we can't fast track and it has to wait until next year, these are just the concerns that I wanted to not, lose.
I think we have, Wednesday this week, we have a leadership team meeting where we're gonna talk about including a greater number of parents, in the handbook review ahead of time. So, inevitably this would get in front of more parents prior to getting to the board.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not particularly comfortable changing part of it.
I'm not, I
all
forgot
got
to say
changes,
handbook,
there's a lot
yeah.
of them, so.
Well, yes, and
That would just be my input, but then you guys decide how you want to go.
no, and that is right, because I made a point before that it was from the committee of the Parent Student Handbook Committee. We brought that to the board, we voted on it May 20th, we did pass it for the year, for the 19-20 school year. So, in a sense, this can be major, hey, we looked at this, these are some things that we have, Parent Student Handbook Committee, look at these things. They'll be convening.
At any rate, I'm fine if you wanna just bring it to the board and they can have their 2 cents too. I mean, it really was just a discussion point with some things that I just thought would, make for a better agreement.
I'm confused by the motions.
So I said take my motion off the table.
Are we motioning things?
Well, it shouldn't be a motion because it's not a policy, it's a handbook.
Consensus, right, what we're talking about?
I think for this meeting, we'll do consensus and then we'll figure out exactly moving forward what these committee meetings need to do in terms of making a decision and how we know when we say it's, yeah.
So do you want the board to lay eyes on this?
Sure.
On October 21st?
I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I would
Discussion
welcome
item.
some more feedback.
Okay.
Since we've been talking about it and it's kind of been in the same sphere, it'd be great to have other people ring in on it, because there could be something that I didn't think about either, so I think more eyes is the better.
Thank you for calling me on that.
Sure.
Our committee purpose, or do we cover what committee purpose?
I think so, I'm just still a little confused, just because in the past, we had a committee and we made recommendations to the board, and we're kind of going back and forth still. So we just have a lot more policy issues coming up, and it's a learning process, and I think we'll figure it out as we go. I'm not that regimented,
Well, I mean, for me, the purpose of a policy committee is to do the deep dive, and to then be able to go to the board and say, in this policy, we saw these issues and we want to address them as the board, and what do we want to do? And there's this policy, and then if there's a policy where we say, yes, we would recommend that as is, this seemed fine to us, we didn't have anything that we thought we needed to call out, now somebody else might, but I think we do need to have a process for these littler committees as to how we make decisions, just like we do for the big board, because sometimes it's confused. Did we have consensus? Well, I said that, but I didn't really think we were, so I think we need a mechanism to make sure that when we make a decision and a recommendation, we all feel comfortable, and I think the easiest way to do that is through motions and votes. And so I think moving forward, my suggestion would be, if we want to recommend something, we actually make a motion that says we want to take this policy in whatever form it is to the board with our recommendation. And then that way we can go and there's no question as to, that I just think that's a cleaner way to do it. I think minutes wise, it's also easier for somebody to read through a history and understand what happened. So that would be my suggestion.
just we've had some stuff and then.
I know, I think we just need to get a little bit cleaner in our work, so.
I don't have anything else.
Okay. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting at 2:32.
Perfect. All right, thanks for coming, everybody. Thank you.
Don't you? You got tea or coffee? Have it? Well, we have that for you, right?
Yes, take care. Goodbye. Thanks, Dawn. Sorry, it was a little confusing. We'll get it together.
Thank you, Andy.
Well, I think it's in our best interest to start, treating this as a, it's cleaner. So I think we'll